You've counted every calorie, tried every diet, spent hours in the gym, and still something's missing. You want more than just weight loss. You want your energy back. You want your confidence restored. You want a way of living that doesn't feel like punishment. Welcome to Master Your Metabolism, where we cut through the noise, ditch the fads, and give you a real plan to become the healthiest, strongest version of you. Hosted by our team of expert coaches with proven strategies, science-based tips, and real-life encouragement, not just to help you lose fat, but actually create that lifestyle that you love. You've tried everything. Now, let's try what actually works. This is your turning point. Let's go. Hey there, everybody. Thank you so much for joining Mastering Metabolism. We are here today with Calvin.
What's up?
And Logan. So I figure I'd get the trainers on here to be able to answer some questions. And the first ones that I'm going to give are probably the most popular questions that we get in regards to training, cardio, and all of the things. So we'll start off that I will just kind of throw the question out there, and then you guys just kind of each give your input. If somebody has something more to add, we'll kind of go from there. So a really common question that we get is, will lifting weights make me bulky?
Ooh,
No.
the famous question.
If-
the most
if-
hated question on social media.
If somebody can find a workout split that will make them look like Ronnie Coleman on accident, then they can let us all know.
Yeah.
Okay,
And
get
we
us
can
in on
all
that. Get
Let
us
me
in
get
on
join
that.
that.
No, so the training won't make you bulky. It will build your muscles, but if you have body fat on top of the muscle, it can create more of a bulky look because it's the body fat, but it's not the muscle itself. So this is why you want to kind of get the diet right and not just rely on the training to lose body fat. So I think that's where the misconception is that, building can make you bulky. But if you do have a decent amount of body fat first, I would recommend going into a cut, while you're lifting, and then build back up. And then you won't have that look. You'll have a much cleaner, harder look.
Yeah, for sure. I know that a lot of people complain about that. As soon as they start lifting, they start feeling a little bit heavier, looking a little bit thicker.
Well,
Mm.
especially for females, it's going to take women longer to build muscle because they have less testosterone. So if you're at the point where you feel like you're looking bulky, it's not like it's going to happen overnight. It's going to be a gradual thing. But chances are by the time you start to have that hypertrophy kick in and muscles are coming, you're going to have the other things under control as well. So, but it's always got to be hand in hand with the food,
Absolutely. Absolutely.
Because another thing to keep in mind too, right, is like you can lift and you can lift heavy, but if you're not feeding those muscles, they are not going to grow. So you need to be eating enough to build the muscles. Now, I think another misconception, especially like among women, is going into a bulking phase. And that's, a scary concept, I think, to a lot of women. Because a lot of times when you do go into a specific bulking phase and you don't gradually up your calories and you just go, to eating just whatever you can to grow your muscles, like you do kind of, like Calvin said, you get that bulky look because you're also putting fat on because you do need the calories in order to grow the muscle, but you're also going to put fat on, so I think, again, it goes back to you have to have the right nutrition, but you are not going to accidentally get bulky just from picking up heavy weights.
Right.
It's also
Yeah.
a lot of things that, or something that people overlook a lot, especially when they first start working out, is that they're not eating enough to support their training, or they go into it super gung-ho. They want to train really hard like they do on Instagram. They want to get those results. So they're training 5-6 days a week and not eating anything to support it. So then they can cause a cortisol response that'll cause them to hold on to some extra fat. Like while they're first starting that they're not anticipating is because they're not properly recovering because of their diet and because of their lifestyle.
That's a great point. So there is a lot of variables to consider with that. But when it comes down to it, lifting itself is not what's going to do it. But you always want to go and consider the different, pillars of what it takes to improve your physique. And as long as everything's in alignment, you're not going to go in that direction. Training more, eating the right foods isn't going to make you bulky. So, and kind of like Whitney said, as far as like building, your calories need to be in a surplus, period, to be able to build. You can build at maintenance. I'm sorry, I need to be more clear about that. You can build at maintenance calories. It's just a very slow process when you do it. So really about 10% over maintenance is a great guide to go, for building where you can still stay relatively lean, but should put on very little fat. And that's going to really come down to food choices, so it's not just calories, it's food choices, avoiding things that cause inflammation, eating clean foods. It doesn't mean you can't enjoy some things, especially when your metabolism has come up, but in moderation and being smart. And that's it.
Yeah. And another question is, how many days a week should I lift weights?
I'll start. Well, you want to take that one, Logan? Go
No,
ahead.
you can. Okay. Well, I think it's personal depending on what the goals are, how much time you have with your lifestyle. Some people are working multiple, like 5, 6 days a week with night shifts and whatever, so they can't really work in a 5, 6 day split. So if that's your situation, then I would recommend 2 to 3 days, maybe a full body or something like that, because ideally you want to hit every muscle group at least 2 to 3 times a week. So if you're only working out 2 or 3 times a week, then you have to hit everything. So I'd recommend a 2 to 3 day full body split. If you have a little bit more time, then you can probably benefit from a push pull leg, something basic like that, that hits all muscle groups and allows you to specialize a little bit. And then if you have plenty of time and you really want to get big and you have the food to support it, you have everything's in order, your blood work's in order, and you want to just grow, then you can do a 5, 6 day split as long as you're recovering properly and doing it that way. But it really just depends on your lifestyle and what you're trying to accomplish personally.
Yeah, very good. Very good. That's a great point. And so it's like for newbies coming on, you have to think of it as progressive overload. So you're not going to start with 5, 6 days a week. That's just going to be too much. So typically when you have somebody new coming on that's never lifted before, you're looking at about 3 days a week, and it's probably gonna be full bodies, but you keep in mind that those workouts are going to have shorter amounts of reps in the sets, split up during the week, and to allow your body to grow into it. So everything with hypertrophy is about progressive overload, about gradually increasing, whether it's intensity, reps, sets, strength, so the training's the same way. So you would progressively work your way up to more days, and it can depend on like Logan said, it can depend on your goals and your time frame. You can still do 3 days per week and still make great progress. Great progress. You could pretty much compete on 3 days a week if you do it properly. But the one thing to consider when training more than a couple of days a week, 2 days a week is really kind of optimal for muscle growth, because in terms of recovery, but your muscles do recover within 48 hours. So technically you can hit them again. That's where the theory of 3 days a week could bring more results. The problem is, and this is, you kind of see this in things like CrossFit and boot camp style workouts where people are just hitting it every day, is that your joints and your ligaments take 72 hours to recover.
Right.
So that gets overlooked a lot. And this is why you see more often, you see injuries and things
Yeah.
like CrossFit, and they blame it on the technique and this and that, maybe, but it's also the constant grinding, and it's ignoring the signs of the pains that you're having because of the overtraining, and probably not eating the adequate food to support that. So 3 days a week can work, but you progressively work your way up based on your level. So
Yeah. And I think another thing, from the other side of the spectrum is when you get people who think like, I need to work out 5, 6 days a week. You just want to make sure that you're also giving your body adequate rest and recovery time, because, back to what Calvin said, if you don't get that recovery time, you're not going to get the results. You're not going to get those gains that you're looking for too. So keep that in mind, and don't do a 7-day split.
never do a 7
That's too
day.
much.
Never do a 7 day. So many people, it's our
It
culture.
happens.
It is the American culture that more is better, just more everything,
Yeah.
And
Yep.
so it's so many people want to do 7 days a week, and you have to have a rest day, at least one per week. And to be honest, I very rarely program 6 days for many people, um, it also depends on if the athlete, when you're talking like competitors, if they're enhanced or natural, how much volume you can give that person. And this is where the internet kind of screws people up, because they'll pick a workout that some pro is using somewhere and they'll take it and they want that because it's harder. It's got to work, right? But their body's not recovering at the same rate as that person because they're enhanced. So you have to think of a natural person versus enhanced. There's a big difference on how much volume they have, and they do require more recovery. So this is where 2 days off per week is a safe bet, to have that. So it's important to consider that. So more is not always better in this case.
Yeah. And when you should be lifting heavy weights or light weights, and how people would be able to know what the weight that they should be using is appropriate, or what they are using is appropriate for their current level?
Well, going back to that last question first, based off of that, if you're getting to the end of the week and you still want to do a 6th or 7th day and you feel like you can do more, you're not training hard enough at all. And that's how you know that you're not at the point that you should be taking breaks. So
Agreed.
realistically, you want to get to a point where by the end of the week, you're like, okay, I need 2 rest days. I need to just chill out for a little bit, let my body recover. That's when you know that you're in a good place. Ideally around like 5 days or so, 4 or 5 days. But once you get to that point, you really know. If you're doing that below and you still have some left over, you're not going heavy enough is one option. You're not pushing hard enough, or you're not using correct form. So one of those 3 you need to figure out, and that once that is all squared away, then you can start worrying about weights, which typically, you hear the 8 to 12 rep range. That's a rough estimate for most people. Typically, I personally like to start with heavier stuff when you first get to the gym, stuff you want to prioritize, big muscles, chest, back, stuff like that. And then kind of towards the end of your workout, once you've burnt through all your glycogen, you're running out of strength or running out of energy, then you can start doing some more volume sets. Then you can start throwing in for a little extra stimulus at the end just to kind of burn out. And that'll give you that little bit of intensity that you need that'll make you want those rest days. When you're doing your volume at the end and you're really burning out and getting every last bit that you have out, that is a way that you can tell that you're training hard enough and using heavy enough weight.
Yeah, I'm really glad you brought that up and chimed in, because this question, actually, we could do a full podcast on it if we wanted to. It does go pretty deep, and Logan didn't really get a decent introduction. I think this is the first time he's been on the podcast with us. That's correct. So he's one of our head trainers that does actually train in person and does online as well. Like Brooke and I right now our plates are full. We don't have time to do one-on-one. So we have Logan for that. And he just does an amazing, amazing job at it and knows his stuff inside and out. So this is Logan, his introduction. So, but it is, what you brought up there is really important to know, because one thing I hear a lot with my guys is I'll give them a workout program, and it's a 5-day, with the volume that's appropriate for them. And then chances are they've been doing a program that was just loaded, high volume, dragged them through the dirt. And so they went harder, harder. And so the first thing that goes up in my head is, you should be crushed after this workout. You should be done. You should be sore. And if you're not, it's for the reason that Logan says. You're not putting the adequate effort in to what it takes to create the hypertrophy. So you can get more volume, but at the end of the day, if you got a sheet of metal, you can take a spoon and hit it over and over again and make very little impact, or you can take a sledgehammer and hit it and get things done really quick. That's the same way you kind of look at the training, is when you go in, you don't need high volume sets. You don't need to do 1 million sets. What you need to have is quality sets, a couple warm-up sets, a couple working sets, but it's really 2 sets in each exercise that really even matter. That's what matters. It's the last 2 and how much effort you put into those. So if you do that right, in reality, your workout is probably gonna be about 8 sets that really matter. And if you aren't putting that effort into those, that's when you have to realize that you're not putting the effort in to put that growth in. So adding an extra day isn't going to make much difference in terms of growth, but probably more just burning calories.
Yep. Can you maybe, Whitney, if you can answer this, like how someone would know that they are truly working to failure?
Yeah. And that was actually, I was going to use what Calvin said to kind of segue into that whole other question too. If you want to lift heavy enough so that by the end of your reps, you might have like a specific rep set, or you might have like a rep range. You want those last couple reps to be a struggle. So whether your rep range is 6 to 8, 4 to 6, or 12 to 15, you want to pick a weight where by the end of it, you're struggling to get it up. You're getting close to failure, because if you're not, then you're not giving your muscles enough stimulus to actually grow. And, the idea of like, should I lift light weights for higher reps? No, you shouldn't lift light weights unless it's challenging to you. And so I think that idea and misconception kind of comes from the fact that, like, yes, you're going to want to pick lighter weights if your reps are in that 12 to 15 range versus that 4 to 6 range, because you have to get to at least 12. but you don't want them to be light to the point where you're not really feeling it by the end of that, where you're not needing that rest and recovery in between sets. You want to need that rest in between sets. So if you're just knocking out sets and taking like a 10-second rest, you're not lifting heavy enough. You need to up the game. And if you're going through your whole workout and you don't find it challenging, you probably need to be picking up heavier weights. And it's okay if you kind of play around a little bit, especially when you're first starting out, to find out what that looks like. And that's one of the reasons why, again, those last 2 sets are the most important ones. So if you're kind of afraid to go towards that 15, 20-pound dumbbell, pick up the 10s. But if that feels too light, there's your warm-up set. Go heavier if you want to see those results.
Yeah, great way to put that. Great way to put that. So there is no such thing as light sets and heavy sets. There is such a thing as higher reps and lower reps, but they're all heavy. It's just relative to what you're able to lift when you hit to those final reps. That's how you kind of gauge it. And just to kind of throw on top of this a little bit more, I can tell you the big difference between the people that you see progressing in the gym and then the ones that are doing really well, and then the ones that kind of look the same, year after year. The ones that are progressing are actually tracking their workouts. They're tracking their weight and keeping a log of some sport. Like, what we have an app, and so they track on there. So that's a game changer. That's one of the big reasons why our clients make better progress than other people, is because they're actually tracking the weights and they're seeing if their weights are improving or increasing throughout the mesocycle. So if it's not, then they need to put more effort in to make that happen. So the tracking is the thing, because if you don't, you're going to have a tendency to go the same every single week. Then 6 months passes and you're still doing the same. So that's just maintaining at that point, which is okay if that's your goal. But if your goal is to grow and you're doing the same as you were doing 6 months ago, you're not growing. You need to increase. So you need to have some form of progressive overload with that.
And a good way to think about the rep ranges, like if you're programmed, let's say 8 to 12, for example, you should think of it 8 to 11 realistically. If you're programmed 15, you should think of it 14. Like you should get to the rep before the last rep and be like, okay, I can't do this last rep. That's when you know that you're within the 8 to 12 rep range and hitting it effectively. If you get to the 11th rep and you don't get 12, then you're perfectly in that range. That means that you're at the top end, and then you just kind of take the weight from there until you get down to 8 or whatever it is. But just imagine that you don't want to get that last rep. Like by the end of your 8 to 12, you should be done.
That's good advice. That's really good advice. All right, so blast us with the next one, Brooke. I know you threw it at us. I totally forgot what it was.
How often should I increase weight that I lift? Kind of piggybacking off what you guys said.
Okay, I can take that one. The weight increases goes back to the tracking. So if you're seeing, one that you're not progressing, you need to kind of put that little bit more effort into it. Just as a common rule, if you're prescribed 8 to 10 reps, and then you're on your last set, which should be your hardest working set, and you're able to complete the 10 reps with clean form, then it's time to increase. It's time to bring it up, whether it's 2.5 pounds, whether it's 5 pounds, whether it's 10. It's time to increase, even though you may only be able to get, if it's 8 to 10, it might be 9 reps or whatever, or 7 reps. It doesn't matter. If you're hitting the goal on that last set, you got to increase the weight. And if you follow that one simple rule of making sure that last set, that you're either one barely able to get that last rep, or you fall one short, but eventually you get it, you're going to grow, period. It's going to happen.
Yep.
So
And also other things that they could do to be able to increase intensity, because sometimes like little muscles like shoulders, that little bit of increase, like 5 pounds, you just can't do it.
So
you can't pay too much.
That's why there's two types of progressive overload. There's weight progressive overload and there's reps progressive overload. And I kind of use them in different situations depending. For larger muscles like chest, back, and things like that, where you're doing a lot of compound movements, I like to do micro loading, which is like where you go to near your top range. You're going for strength sets. You're trying to increase your weight, and you throw a little 2.5 on each side. Or if you're squatting, you throw a little 2.5 or a 5 on each side. That's more than you did last time. If you did 2.5, then add the 2.5s, then you have 2.10. Even though it's 5 pounds and it looks silly, it's still progressive overload. You're still, if you hit it for 6 like you did last week, it's still 5 pounds heavier. So you're getting stronger. but it's a lot safer to do it on those big compound movements because they're strong and they can support it. But on little movements like shoulder, for example, or biceps or something like that, it's a little bit easier to go through the reps pathway of progressive overload, where you do the same weight, but you do 11 reps this time instead of 10, and so forth. So, and you can switch them out in between, but I personally don't like to risk anything with the smaller muscles like biceps or shoulders, which are common to tear or under extreme load. So I would prefer to stick with the rep increase than a micro load type situation for that.
Is because I've heard also that you could possibly adjust the timing, like the intensity that you're doing. So slowing down the movements would also be something
Well,
that
Yeah. So, like, your tempo would be another way that you could progressively overload. So, say that on the negative, you do like a slower count, and then just like, sorry, a one count on like the up of the movement. So, then over time, you will build and you'll get stronger in that movement. And that will actually help you towards being able to go heavier in that movement. And another thing that I actually like to try to with certain movements is if I feel, like shoulders are a good one because it's like if you're right in between that like 10 and 15, where I was for a long time, start with the 15s and do a drop set for your last set, and see how many you can safely and with decent form get with the 15s, then drop it and finish it out with the 10s, and over time you will start to be able to lift the 15s for more reps, and then you can start moving up and do the next set of weights with the same concept.
Yeah,
Nice.
drop sets are great. Drop sets are great. And for those that don't know, like a drop set, usually the most common one is you drop about 30% of the weight and then you drop another 30%. So you do the original weight, of what you're doing. And if you fall a few short, but your goal is to try to increase that weight, then you get it and then you drop immediately. No break. You drop down 30% and then go till you can go to failure on that one and then drop it again if you can. And that's going to bring intensity. So drop sets are really good. Another one that is probably the most common one that I use myself is when I'll be adding the weight and then I'll be like maybe one rep short or something like that. And so what I'll do is I'll put the weight down and I'll rest my breast for about 3 to 5 seconds. Just kind of shake my arms off, then I'll grab it again. And usually you can get 1 to 3 more reps with that. So those are actually forced reps, but they're clean forced reps, because you sat down, you recovered for a few seconds, you put it up. So that's another way to kind of push more than what you were doing before. So I'd recommend that one on the last set. Same with the drop sets.
Nice.
Yeah. So
What's the best way to tone my arms, my legs, or my stomach?
get your food right. Stop eating Dairy
So-
Queen.
so- Well, you're going to want to build muscle. So you're going to want to lift
Yeah.
weights because you're not toning anything if there's nothing underneath to tone. And then you're also going to want to get your nutrition right. And that's the
Right.
secret.
And I
That's
tell
it.
everybody, they always look for those belly busters or whatever it is. And I'm
Yes.
like, kind of like a bathtub. Like you're going to lose body fat kind of everywhere. It's not like you're going to dig that water out of the bathtub and you're going to have like a little tunnel of water in that one spot. It's like you're just going to keep taking out cups and the whole level is going to come down. So
Well, and
lots
you can't spot
Right.
reduce, right? Like that's a big one. So you don't need to waste your whole life just doing crunches all day. You're going to want to build overall muscle tone and you're going to want to drop body fat if you're going to want to see that muscle underneath. And
Yeah.
that's-
Gotta have muscle to have tone. If you think of it, because just to kind of define what the tone is, it's just basically shadows, that you're seeing on a body. And that comes from the contour of it. So the more fuller the muscles are, the more you're going to see that shadow kind of show. The leaner the muscles are, you're going to see that it's a little bit more crisp, the definition that kind of pops up from it. So if there is a certain amount of body fat on top of the muscle, you're not going to see the tone as much, because it's going to be more of a faded kind of look. So, but ultimately you have to build the muscle and carbs are really what kind of creates tone in most cases. I think a lot of people kind of crash diet they find and their goal is to be toned. They don't want to build, they don't want to bulk, but they want to be toned. So they cut carbs. They do something like keto or even carnivore or something, and they bring it down. But there's no fullness in the muscles because glycogen is what brings fullness into the muscles. So what happens is they end up looking like a smaller version of what they were previously. They're less weight, but just a smaller version. There's no tone. So now you have to bring the carbs in to kind of fill the muscle out, and some sodium, the proper amount of sodium. For athletes per day should be somewhere in the range of probably 2,500 minimum up to 4,000, depending on the person, how much they sweat to hold fullness in the muscles. If you're dehydrated and the sodium's low, you will flatten out and you will lose your tone. And if you're dehydrated, water will go into the subcutaneous area, your skin, and it'll blend things out. So increase in water is another way to kind of bring that out too, to flush out the excess water, and that keeps the water out of your skin and helps keep the muscles full. And the sodium delivers the water into the muscles to bring the fullness with the carbs.
Mm.
So
And the concept of like toning is really just building muscle and losing fat, which don't really happen at the same time necessarily. It's a process, which is a long-term thing, but there's a short term if you get your food correct and you're training properly and you're supporting with water and whatnot, there's a short-term toning effect that can happen where you reduce inflammation in your skin, so your face looks a little bit leaner, your body looks leaner, there's less intercellular water that's making you look flushed out. And if you eat properly with your carbs and your protein and your healthy fats, then the glycogen's filled in your muscle. And so your muscle is physically bigger. So your skin is tighter and your muscle is physically bigger because you fixed your diet. So now you look a little bit toned, but you're not really toning anything. Toning comes from building muscle, losing fat, which is a longer term process. But you can get both while trying to achieve the long term one.
Yeah,
mhm.
because I do see a lot of guys that think that they can gain like 5 pounds of muscle in a couple of months. So we talk about that, about reality, about building muscle and how long it takes and why you don't just get bulky all of a sudden by accident. When you go to the gym once or twice.
Yeah, they better sit down and brace themselves for this. We're about to give them some hard truths.
Mm.
So,
But
the,
we can
People
talk
have,
first about newbie gains of the people who have never trained before.
yeah, we're going to cover that for sure. That's where, yeah. So, just right out of the gate, you just want to know that hypertrophy takes about 4 to 6 weeks. So, what you're training right now, you're going to see the results of that in about 4 to 6 weeks. So, it's not like, a week later you're feeling more big because you just crushed it last week. That's probably a little bit of inflammation and maybe more carbs or something, but the actual muscle tissue is 4 to 6 weeks. Now, here's the thing to consider as far as how much muscle can you actually gain in a short period of time. It varies on the person. Obviously, like I was saying before, with men, you're going to progress faster because you have higher testosterone levels. Women are a little bit less, but I'm going to be honest with you. Especially over the last few years, I would almost challenge that a little bit. I've seen females put on muscle at a pretty rapid pace, so they basically work more off androgens, females do. So you don't have to have super high testosterone levels. But if your body's healthy and in a good place, you can pack on a lot of muscle. Whitney's a great example of that. Her transformation says it all, So it isn't like it takes forever to do it, but if you do, you have to do things properly. It's just more components with the female, more variables to deal with. But as far as like the typical person, the newbie gains are magical. That's when you first start lifting, like really lifting, like doing it properly, because like there's a lot of people that have been to the gym, but they didn't know, they didn't have a trainer. And so they're just kind of going through motions. I almost don't count that time, as actual training unless I thought that they were doing it properly. But when you first go into the gym, all your receptors are just firing off. If this is brand new to your body, it responds really well. And you can put on a ridiculous amount of muscle in a short period of time. You have about 6 months in that window that you can just slay it. And I'm
Logan
talking
took full advantage of that.
Logan's a
Yeah,
great example of that, what he did.
mm,
He
yeah.
had a cheat sheet.
Yeah,
I
this
had parents that kind of helped and do
that
it.
was an epic transformation.
Yes.
Yeah. And so, but that was a great example of it, but he did the things, he was eating the food and he was doing the things to do that, which all comes in alignment with this to be able to achieve it. But with newbie gains, the funny thing is you don't even have to be perfect. You can just be eating, you're still going to progress and gain muscle. But if you optimize it, and actually eat the adequate amount of protein and carbs and fats, you can really get the most out. Like that's what Logan did, it was different. And that's why you can put on muscle at the rate that you probably couldn't do enhanced, in that window. And then it slows down after the 6 months, but you can still add a good amount over some years, over the first few years, after that. I would say somewhere in the range of probably 5 pounds, um, maybe possibly up to 10, in a year. But I would say with newbie gains, you can put on like 20 pounds in a year.
Yeah.
Logan pretty much maximized it, but
I
after
mean,
that,
there's with the newbie gains, and like a big thing is like, yes, you're progressing a lot faster than you will probably 2, 3, 4 years into it, but there is a limit and a cap to how much, like at the end of the day, you have myostatin, you have a limit that's stopping you at a certain point from how much you can really gain. Like your body's not adapted to it yet, so you're putting on size really quickly because you're just ripping through it. But once you get used to it, it's different. But when people join the gym, they understand the concept of newbie gains, and they hear that, and they're like, "Oh, let me just go balls to the wall, put on 30 pounds of muscle. I have newbie gains. That's like steroids. I can just eat whatever I want." And they see people on Instagram and TikTok that are eating bowls of cereal and things like that to eat or to get to 6,000 calories a day, and they think, "Oh, if I just eat 6,000 calories a day, like Rich Piana or like Sam Sulek or something like that, then I can do that. I have newbie gains. It's fine." But it's not at all. And you have
Is
to take into the account that a lot of these people that you're seeing on Instagram are on steroids, and a lot of steroids meant for horses and cattle. So you're not going to be at the same rate as them, and you're not going to be, your hypertrophy is not going to be occurring at the same rate as them. So they can go and eat 3,000 calories worth of cereal because their body, all it's concerned with is producing new muscle right now. So they can do that, and it works differently for them. But for a natural lifter, somebody getting into it that's doing it and wants to take advantage of their newbie gains, the best things you can do is worry about protein intake and recovery from your proper training.
yeah, 100%. And genetics are huge. Listen, we all have them. We all have our pros and cons, and we all have our own little battles with genetics. But it just is what it is. A certain build is only going to grow so much and progress so much. But you can any physique that there is can kind of blast out of the genetic factor over time. Time and knowledge, and really perfecting the art of lifting and the diet. Genetic is an excuse in the beginning, but it can be evolved out. That's the thing. But it will have a big impact, like on the newbie muscle, as far as who can gain more, because some people do have an unfair advantage because they just put on muscle easier. Whether it's an ectomorph build or endomorph, which if they even really consider those things anymore. But it is something that you still have to consider. If you're low muscle tone, and you have about, say for guys, say 25% body fat, you're not going to look like Sam Bullock because you're eating 6,000 calories. You're going to kind of look fat, when that happens. It just is what it is, but you have to kind of work with what you have. But anybody, no matter what your genetics are, can have an amazing, amazing physique. Anybody can. And when you really, truly optimize that physique over time, you won't be dissatisfied. Regardless, you might not look like Joe across the street or in the gym or whatever, but trust me, you're going to be very happy. So you don't want to let that discourage you,
Well, and I think that kind of hits on an important point too, is like you're taking away from your whole fitness journey if you're comparing yourself to everybody else, like you're going to have a certain look, you're going to have a body type, you're going to have a certain type of genetics. And if you're maximizing your training and you're trying to just do better than you did the day before, over time, you're going to see the results. And like Calvin said, you're going to be happy with them, because I think, and talking about Instagram kind of just brings up like a lot for males and females, because I think on the other side of the coin, you have a lot of female influencers out there who, the ones who want to talk about the long, lean muscles. And if you do the little
5-pound
tiny pound weights, and you just do a
Yeah.
ton of like just crazy moves, and it's like you're gonna get the long, lean muscles, like and that is maybe some women are built that way, not all. Like I'm not going to get these like the like Pilates
in my next
body.
life, I'm going to have those long 5'7",
Yeah.
but this life
Listen,
didn't happen. I got
Yeah.
shorts.
Pilates, no. that give you a nice core, but it does not build in muscle the way these women think. I know I'm going to get some
No.
haters from this, but it doesn't.
And the
No,
reason
and it
being
doesn't,
is
and
because of
that's
that progressive overload, because you
exactly.
must have increased. So that's why the Pilates, absolutely. I see women that are doing it and they have great core strength. That's awesome. But you're not going to be able to see the improvement with your body composition, not seen without having progressive overload, without starting
Right.
to.
And I think it's important to know that like not everyone that you see that is promoting this certain type of body is because that's all that they're doing.
Yep.
Or, you know, you're going to get this body if you do my exact workout. Like if somebody does my exact workouts, they may not get the same body as I do, but they're going, if they put their all into it, they progressively overload, they do everything that we've talked about here today, they're going to really love the results. And that's, I think, the important thing.
Yeah, it's just consistency, day after day after day, sticking to it, trying to improve your diet, trying to be as best as you can. Nobody's perfect, you know. You're gonna have times, you know, but it's what you do 80% of the time, you know. And it, you know, as far as kind of what I was getting to as far as muscle, because we kind of veered off that a little bit too. You have a gym life, you know, that starts from the day that you start lifting, right? So that's your gym life. So my gym life started the summer after 8th grade, after I saw a really cool Rocky movie. And he would, yeah, I was fired up. I was ready. I was going to get all the girls after seeing this. So, and that was the beginning of it. And so went in and made huge changes, newbie gains. When I went, you know, into high school, everybody's like, what did you do? Got a lot of attention. I hit it at the right time. Just got lucky. But that gym life started at that point. So now here I am X amount of years later, we'll just say some decades. And you know, so, but I can tell you now where I am now, even at pro level, if I put on a pound of muscle a year, maybe 2 pounds, I'm thrilled. I am thrilled. You know, if I show up on stage a year later and I gain 2 pounds, whoo, heck yeah, I nailed it. And it is what it is, because as gym life progresses, you basically are not going to put on the same amount of muscle for the reasons that Logan was talking about before. You know, that your body does have a limit. And once you start to reach it, it starts to slow down, you know, so and it does happen, you know, over time. So again, like with what Whitney says, you don't want to compare to other people because you don't know where they are in their gym lifetime or what they're doing. What it is it's a self-improvement thing. So you just ultimately want to just try to get better and better and stay consistent, you know, but the growth you can, on average, it'll be some years that you could, you know, get past this, but I'd say an average probably 5 pounds a year, and 7 pounds, 5 to 7 pounds. If you really get lucky and do everything right, 10 pounds, you know, but that won't be forever. It will progressively get less, but you're also progressed in the food and how to get the food right. So less body fat makes you look a lot bigger. You know, like when I go and do a cut, I can drop 20 pounds and everybody says I look huge, but I'm 20 pounds lighter, you know? And it's just an illusion. It's just you're seeing the muscles, you're seeing the definition that we were talking about before. So there's different ways to manipulate things and create the look. So you can literally sculpt the body that you want, you know, through the time. But you just have to be realistic with how much muscle you can actually grow in a certain period of time.
And we've talked about using nutrition, obviously, as the primary focus to be able to lose body fat. But a lot of people will ask about cardio and using cardio to lose body fat. So just asking, how much cardio should I be doing to lose body fat? And when should I be doing cardio?
Any takers?
Well, I can
I-
talk about cardio timing. Typically, it's like dependent on what your current state is, how much body fat you have right now. If you have a lot of work to do, then you have more room to kind of get going on the cardio or do some more high intensity stuff. Once you get down to lower body fat percentage and the time it took to get from 135 to 130 is the same amount of work it takes to get from 130 to 129.8. So once you get down to that super, super low body fat, that last percentage, then it becomes a lot more difficult and you have to start changing your cardio patterns to support it and doing things that are a little bit less intense so that you can preserve your muscle while still getting rid of that body fat in a healthy rate. And in terms of daily of when you should plan your cardio, typically you want to have it outside separate from your working out if you want to preserve the muscle the best. But you can, if you need to burn a little bit more, do it at the end of your workout, because then you're already burned through your glycogen and you're just going straight for the source. So typically, if you want to preserve muscle, I do it a separate time, maybe in the morning before you go to the gym, or after, whatever it is, a couple hours later. But if you really need to get that fat off, then I would throw a little session, maybe some steady state at the end after immediately following your workout.
Yeah. I, I don't know if you wanted to add, Whitney. I was going to chime in, but if you want to go first.
Well, I just basically wanted to add to, when it comes to cardio, and Logan touched on this too by saying, put it at the end of your workout. Don't prioritize cardio over strength training. Make sure that you're always prioritizing your strength training, because, that is where you're putting on muscle that's building your metabolism. So ultimately, the more muscle you have, the more fat that you're burning, the more calories that you're burning throughout your day, even at rest. And so if you're sacrificing your strength training for your cardio, and you're doing the cardio to lose body fat, it's not going to work out the way that you want it to work out. Um, and also, and cardio's great for overall health. And if your goals are things like running marathons or, endurance training, like, been there, I get it. You're not going for an aesthetic, you're not necessarily going for putting on muscle, then yes, you can sort of prioritize your cardio in that instance. But if you're looking for fat loss, where you're really going to see the biggest improvement in body composition is by putting on that muscle, and then strategically including cardio on top of that.
Yeah, 100%. It's endurance athletes are a little different, and also people with big weight drops. If you have somebody who has 100 pounds plus, you kind of have to throw everything in the kitchen sink at them. To be honest, when they have more body fat, it's more insulation. It protects the hormones more. They can go more aggressive. Then the leaner you are, the more careful you have to be with stress and things like that, and controlling stress. So sometimes cardio can be a big stressor. If you're doing an hour of cardio plus training and your body fat's pretty low, you're going to be stressed, Whereas somebody has 200 pounds, they can handle it a little bit more. They can handle lower calories. They can handle more cardio. Still is a lot of work, but that's where you might see a difference in the change of training styles. Somebody like that could do workouts where they're doing intervals type thing with weights, like boot camp style. That can work very well for somebody like that, because their main objective isn't at the time to build the muscle. If they have 100 pounds, 200 pounds to lose, chances are they probably have a lot of muscle because they're carrying that weight around. So that's not all of a sudden our priority to build them out, because our priority is to get them back to health again so they don't have a heart attack. So that's where you would see you start them off still where they are. You don't just blast them out of the gate, but they can do something like, more compound movements, squat, curl, press, and then in between maybe do something to get the heart rate up, and then catch your breath and do it again. That works great for people like that, and not great for body composition when you're lower body fat. So that's important for people to understand when they're thinking of what type of training they can do, because a lot of people like group classes, but that should really be determined on where your body is and where you want it to go. So if you're only carrying for females, say 20% body fat, but you want to get toned and you want to look athletic, probably not a group class. Like Logan said, you're going to be way more optimal if you separate the training and the cardio at a separate time. Or like Whitney said, you put the cardio at the end of the workout. Those would be the optimal times to do it, but not together. Your training, once you get to a certain body fat, should be separate. Focus on building. That's what you focus on at that time, taking breaks between sets, whether it's 60 seconds to 3 minutes, maybe even 5 minutes, depending on the intensity. And then later in the day, or at least 6 hours difference, that's when you put in the other cardio. That's optimal for it. So, but for somebody that does have a lot of weight to lose, you need to do everything you can to get the weight off, and then you adjust as things progress.
For sure. And then also talking about adaptations with cardio versus like someone who wants to cut their calories versus do cardio.
That would be it takes about 3 weeks for you to actually start to adapt to the cardio. Um, I, it's something I use as a reference for people is for, say, marathon runners. So if you've ever ran a marathon, half marathon, or whatever, that you kind of add that mile each week. Typically it's about a mile. And you'll notice when you run it that after a couple weeks, you can run what you ran previously pretty easily. But when you add that extra mile, that's when the work starts, you know, because you're not used to it. So that's adaptation. That's what that is. That would be considered for the performance wise, a positive adaptation for running because you're building your endurance for it. But it's kind of a negative adaptation for body composition because what it really means when it's translated over is you're burning less calories in that first part of the running because your body's used to it.
Used to it. Yeah.
So yeah, so like if you're looking at say you run 5 miles a day, you know, and that's just your thing, 5 days a week, 5 miles a day, you're going to burn the first week the most calories doing it. And then slowly that's going to come down. And by the end of the month, it's going to be maybe, I don't know, 2/3 the amount of what you were burning originally because your body's adapting. So now what ends up happening, I see this a lot, is people that are at maintenance calories, but they're still doing cardio, but their body's not changing because they're just maintaining what they had to build, you know, but they're not really progressing. They can progress if they increase cardio, but here's the problem. How much cardio can you actually handle in a day? How much time do you have? Do you have 2 hours a day to do it? Keep building. And this is where, and a good example of why cardio should not be the main tool, you know, for fat loss. Food is always going to be the main thing. And cardio is just, it's a tool. The way that I like to use it is when you're in a cutting phase to not have to cut calories again. Say the calories are getting low, you can just add a little bit of cardio in that kickstarts it, but you know it's going to be for the duration of the fat loss phase, you know, and then you just start with a little bit and you leave yourself room to increase as you progressively go. That's how we get people ready for stage to compete. And it works. That's how you get them down to 4% body fat. Isn't that the magical? But it's not overusing it, which can happen when they do too much cardio in the off season as their body's used to it. And they come in, now they already have their baseline of, you know, 30 minutes cardio a day, 45 minutes cardio a day. You can only add onto it, you know? And so that's something to kind of consider when you're doing it, but also when you're doing, you know, boot camp style workouts, your body can adjust and you notice that you'll do great. You'll lose the most weight in that first, you know, 30 to 60 days. Then it starts to taper off because you can only put so much into those workouts. You're going 100%, but your body's adapting. So this is where the food's critical, but that, and also, HIIT training doesn't adapt the way that steady state does. That's one thing to keep in mind is your body will adapt quicker to steady state. HIIT doesn't the same, but when your carbs are coming down, I do not recommend doing HIIT training because it's going to make you binge. It's going to make you extremely hungry. It takes recovery just the way weight training does, and it can lead you to overtraining. So you have to use it when the carbs are there to support it, but that can be aggressive towards fat loss, you know, at the same time, and you can still get away with it. So like I like to use it on refeed days. So if somebody does refeed, I do 3 to 5 HIIT intervals on the refeed days, and it always brings a positive response, you know.
Yeah. And Logan, can you talk a little bit about HIIT and like what an example of HIIT training would be?
All right, so HIIT is short for high intensity interval training, which is basically, like he was saying, the 3 to 5 rounds where you do 3 to 5 separate bursts of the highest intensity cardio movement that you could think. So sprints, rope slams, ball slams, whatever you can do consecutively for about 20 to 30 seconds that gets you completely worn out, that you're on the floor panting at the end of it. That's the workout that you pick and you do it. So sprints, for example, you'll do your first round, 20, 30 seconds, as fast as you can as fast as you can, full sprint. And by the end, you should be on the floor wheezing. And then you do it again for your second round, and then your third round, and then up to 5. And then I wouldn't go past 5, but you get the idea. You do it for your 3 to 5 rounds.
Yeah. So again, and it's something that does tax your central nervous system. So how often would you recommend doing HIIT for somebody?
I would say 1 to 2 days a week. For me, 3 is too much.
Yeah, I think it depends on how hard the person trains. I've had some people do it 3 days a week, but it is, if you're really doing HIIT properly, like really maxing out, and going all out, then 3 days is pretty tough. You know, if you're doing a moderate HIIT is what is probably more common, where you see people doing like 60 seconds. If you're doing real HIIT, you're not going to last 60 seconds unless you're not human, you know. But if you're going and you're high intensity, for 60 seconds. That's a little bit different, but that's not technically really hit. It still will bring a return, but it's just going to require more intervals. So even with that, that's probably something that I would max out 3 days a week, and just kind of use it at your discretion, see how you feel, but it can get the needle moving. It can absolutely do that, especially for people that are insulin resistant, because it uses glycogen as the main fuel source, so it can burn through excess glycogen. It's a great trick to use if there's a holiday coming up and you're going to be going somewhere and it's going to be holiday food. When you go to train that morning, do 3 to 5 hit sessions after. And what you're going to do is you're going to burn through glycogen, excess glycogen, and you're going to also have a little bit of an afterburn. I don't think the afterburn is as much as what people originally thought, but it still is an afterburn where you're thermogenic, your body's more thermogenic that day, so you can get away with eating a little bit more food. Now, I wouldn't abuse that because that would be an eating disorder, but but it is something that I sometimes recommend to people that have an event coming up and they know they're going to do it and they know the carbs are there to support it. And then, so it can be a good tool in that sense,
Yep. And can I replace cardio with steps or daily activity?
So cardio looks different for everybody depending on where their starting point is. So that might be sufficient for somebody that just got started, is sedentary lifestyle, doesn't really do much, maybe overweight, whatever it is. Sometimes it's just step ups is plenty. That's what gets their heart rate going. That's what works for them. And then on the other side of the spectrum, you have an athlete that he can do incline walks for 2 hours and his heart rate doesn't get above 80. So it's different for everybody, but it's really situational and what you need specifically.
Yeah, it goes back to the progressive overload thing. It's the same with cardio. So it's when you first start, whether it's lifting or cardio, start minimal. Less is more, and see if that's enough to get things moving. But leave yourself room to build up on it. So steps is a great way, just to get the body moving more. If you prescribe 10,000 steps in a week, that's a lot of steps. And so what I find when I do this with people is I tell them, okay, the goal right now is 10,000 steps. Now what you see people purposely getting out, walking more. Maybe when they go to the grocery store, they're taking the far spot, they're not taking the close spot, and they're doing the opposite of what most people do. But what that's doing is that's getting more neat activity or more movement, which in turn is burning more calories. It's when I give the 10,000 steps, it's not necessarily that I'm trying to get 10,000 steps. What I'm trying to do is get them moving more. And so then you can kind of increase on that, 12,000, even 14, but it just depends how active the person is. You got a waiter in a restaurant, they're probably getting 10,000 steps. This would be a person that if I was going to put them in a cutting phase, I would probably give them very little cardio, very little, because they're already getting 10 to 12,000 steps. So that gets put into the equation. Now, again, like I said, you do adapt, but steps does help to maintain that. It is movement versus sitting and being sedentary. So it's a great way to start. A great way to start is but you do want to keep in mind though, and in progression, depending on where you want to get your body fat, you may have to at some point increase, and do more, and unless the food's really on point.
Yeah. And I see this a lot, especially with my new moms that I work with, sometimes, and in the same kind of instances, like when you're just starting out, sometimes like the only thing that you can do is just kind of take baby out for a walk or just go outside for a quick walk and then you're back at it. You can get like a walking pad for your desk. They're like walking is one of the easiest things and something that doesn't cause a lot of stress on the joints either. So it's a really great activity to get your body moving. And, you can walk back and forth through the house. And if that's more than what you were doing before, then yes. If that's what gets you up and moving and doing cardio, then, you can change it out from there when things start to slow down. But any way that you're getting your body moving more when you're saying it's that versus being sedentary, it's a good thing.
Yeah, that's a great thing that Whitney on her shoulders just said. That was a when our bodies are meant to. I feel like your shoulders are yelling at me.
They're getting very passionate.
So that our bodies are meant to walk. So good things happen when you walk. And what a lot of people don't realize is there's a lot more to walking than you think. especially in terms of stress, cortisol, even loading melatonin into your body. You can go at certain times of the day. If you go in the morning, cast it outside, the sun hits you, the cortisol comes up, it resets your circadian rhythm, it loads melatonin in your skins. And then this helps to your body as a side byproduct of it to burn fat as well, just by managing the stress in addition to what you're burning on it. So, and a 20-minute walk after you have a meal increases insulin sensitivity, it helps digestion, and this in turn helps you lose weight. So you can never walk enough, and like what you said, it doesn't require recovery. It's really just what our bodies are meant to do. It's when people stop and they stop moving and don't start walking, this is when health issues start to come in. Walking more is just a staple of what everybody should be doing. Start taking the far spot. Quit looking for that closest. Unless you live in Florida and it's the afternoon, you're going to get rained on. Better get a close spot.
And if you have kids, sometimes too.
Right.
I
If you
will
have
say that
kids.
caveat.
That's a different
Well,
thing.
yeah, if you have kids, you probably burn more calories than you think just chasing after
Getting
them
them in and out of the
anyway.
car.
You go take that close spot. Go ahead. Yeah.
So we're going to go ahead and wrap this up here. Thank you so much, guys. I think we got a lot of really good information out, a lot of good answers to common questions. So I'm going to go ahead and ask everybody to please, if you wouldn't mind sharing a review, we would truly appreciate it. And we thank you so much for tuning in to our podcast. And until the next episode, we will see you then.
Yes.
Have a good one,
Bye-bye.
guys. Bye.
Thanks for tuning in to Master Your Metabolism. If you found value in today's episode, it would mean the world to us if you'd hit subscribe and share this episode with someone who could use a little guidance in their health journey. Ready to take the next step? Head over to www.mastersfitnesscoaching.com and you can book a free call right from the site so we can chat about your goals and how we can help support you. Don't forget to join our Facebook group where we're sharing coaching tips, support, and tricks to help keep you on track and continue making progress. You don't have to do this alone. We're here to walk with you every step of the way. Until next time, stay consistent, stay kind to yourself, and keep mastering your metabolism. Let's do this together.